Boys, I love talking to smart people.
Here we go. 1, 2, 3, boom, boom, boom. All right. Hi, this is Eric Stromquist. Welcome to Control Talk, now your smart buildings videocast and podcast for the week ending February 18th, 2018. This is episode 255, where we talk about all things smart building controls. And what would that be without the man, the myth, the legend, the one, the only Kenny Smyers? When he's not in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, he's in Las Vegas, winning millions of dollars on the craps tables. He is like the most interesting guy in the controls business. So Kenny, man, thanks for taking a few minutes, stepping away from the poker table and entertaining all the people in Vegas to talk with us today, buddy. Welcome to the show, big dog.
Well, thank you very much, Eric. And yes, I'm out here at Rose. The temperature is it's getting warmer, 50 degrees. I'm outside here by the pool area and the cabana area, and it's a beautiful place. The W out here in Las Vegas. It's the first time I've been to this hotel. It's the old Sahara, I believe. They diced it up into two different hotels. But just like you set a record one time with giving up the most goals in a game, if I went and gambled, I'd be giving up my money and set a new record on how fast you can lose your hard-earned money. So
I tell you what, me and you both, brother. I tell you, gambling is never ever a deal. Well, listen, man, we got a great show. We got two fabulous guests that are coming up here in just a little bit. We're going to hit on a trend we've been talking about a lot, cybersecurity. So you're going to want to stay tuned for that. But before we get there, Ken, Jim Brand gives 4 important reasons to go to the Niagara Summit. And we're going to be at the Niagara Summit. And what are Jim Brand's 4? I mean, I'm sure the first one is Eric and Ken are going to be there. But what are the other 3 reasons?
Well, Jim Bland says that we have some very important things to talk about come up the April 15th through the 17th in New Orleans at the Hyatt Hotel. The important reasons are that I'll start backwards. One is networking. One is probably the who's who in systems integration worldwide, globally. I've seen people change positions after a meeting with the right people. I've seen people walk out of the breakouts. The second theme would be updating your current professional understandings of what's there, what's available. They're really pushing the new system software as a service. So Niagara 4 now gives you incredible analytics embedded into it. It gives you the ability to asset manage so that you can take care of all the licensing and make sure that your customers and your systems that you're engineering and commissioning and maintaining have the latest and greatest software and security tools. As like you said, the big cybersecurity awareness is just one example after another on how systems are vulnerable, and Tritium's taken great measures in Niagara 4 to reduce those vulnerabilities. And then the last but not least is that Tritium's had some changes with the folks. They got some interesting people that you'll be able to meet in person who are product managers and who are the generators of this new technology. You get a chance to really and truly get to go, if you're a developer, you get to go in deep to the Niagara 4 and see what you can do with it, because basically it's an enabling software framework, and it's gone in directions, using your word, procession. A lot of people thought it was all just for HVAC and building management, but people are doing all kinds of interesting applications with Niagara 4. So this is where you really get a chance to see all these case studies and all these great minds come together in one place.
Yeah, and if you want to go, and a lot of people call it, the black box, the voodoo and all that of controls, and it's in New Orleans. So that's another reason to go. And last time we were there, man, it was one of the most incredible events ever. They had a parade. We were right behind, in a park with the Superdome on one side, the hotel on the other. So Tritium knows how to throw a party. They know how to educate people. So this is going to be a fun place to be. And speaking of fun places to be, buddy, I know you're out there gambling, making millions of dollars, but you're also spending a little time with another major controls group out there, our friends at Siemens, and they had a great video on their new economizer and controller video. But so talk about that, but also tell us about what you're doing in Vegas outside of making millions of dollars.
It's the Siemens 2018 Siemens Partner Summit, and this is Siemens's annual event where they too have some fabulous partners that they get. So there'll be another technical session. There'll be a business channel, a technical channel. They'll have a great awards banquet where they will recognize the outstanding talent systems integrators and talent partners throughout the country, and then they also have some new products, and so I like coming to these things, and I just wanted to side note that Niagara 4, I think we're going to have a chance to work with the Tritium folks, and get deep into their vendor area where we're going to take some interviews and do some live broadcast.
Have microphone will travel. That's us, right?
Right. So that's we're looking forward to doing that. But what I really get, I think it's a different relationship when you get in person and you see people who have that passion, who are personally committed to the success of products. The product managers, that's a tough job. And you hold your breath, and you're looking for as much feedback as possible. You put this thing through so many scenarios and application challenges, and then you really get the feedback from the customers that you have, the loyal customer base who are out there putting in. So Siemens has some new products that they're really excited about. Their newest key themes are total room automation and their new DXR controllers that replace their old ATEX and PTEX. So they're very excited about the progress they've made with that product portfolio, and this is a chance where they come and they recognize some of the very large projects they had, and everything else. There's always opportunities to suggest improvements and development awareness. So it's always a great meeting. So it begins on Tuesday, February 20th, and goes through Thursday, February 22nd. So, but to the Siemens Building Technologies, the new economizer video and installation video, you and I also seem to take the hardest things first and challenging, and take integration at the vertical integrations. But sometimes it's really, really simple business that the most important things you can do are take advantage of simple technologies that provide amazing results. And one of those is the economizers. And so Siemens put together two videos. One's a 4-minute video, one's about 2.5 minutes. And they show you the immense benefits of using the economizer in certain parts of the country for free cooling, and how that it just saves over the course of a short period of time. You've got your return on investment, 1.5 to 2 years, depending where you're at. But it's an amazingly simple solution, and they put together two very direct videos on the applications, the installations, and the parts and components you need. So it's just a good video, and again, it's a good concept because saving energy just makes sense.
Well, I know. I tell you, Siemens does a great job with the videos and the training and the products. They do all that stuff really well. But I got a question for you, buddy. I've heard of a 3-way valve before. What is this with Belimo and a 6-way valve?
Well, this has to, a lot of things come. What was that 4-way valve that Honeywell used to have way back when? The Sentra?
Yeah, Sentra.
But the engineering solutions that you can design when you have a focus and you're trying to optimize everything with comfort, your CV flows, and you really get to dig deep into it. Nobody probably digs deeper into it than Belimo. And, that's why they've been so successful historically, is because they've taken one aspect and they've just mastered it. So it's direct coupled actuators, and they put, their hearts and minds and souls and engineering souls and into that actuator, and created probably one of the most, dramatic transitions from the foot-mounted motors to direct-coupled actuators that's just been extremely successful. And now they're doing valving. So I see the Belimo's taking leadership roles in many ways, but the webinar it would be the best way to explain what the 6-way EPIV and its innovative design. It's for more energy-efficient operations. So it's a pressure-independent control valve that features heating and cooling circuits that are hydronically decoupled, allowing each sequence to be controlled individually by the actuator. So the combination of a 6-way EPIV valve and ultrasonic flow meter allows the smart actuator to compensate pressure fluctuations in the system, providing design flow to each terminal unit. So if you can register now on the link that we put on Controltrends, you can sign up for it, and I've signed up for it because I want to know more about it.
Well, great stuff there. And then, of course, what would a Controltrends show be without the beauty? Mark Peacock and his team at Link Spring have introduced a beautiful new touchscreen, a TSD 7 touchscreen, and I think Mark called it the 7 because he's hoping the New York Giants will score some touchdowns this year.
Well, good luck, Eli Manning, because it's a rebuild season for the New York Giants. Huh? They're one of my favorite teams. A lot of people don't understand it, but even when you're in the military, you travel around and you meet people from all across the country. And I like the Dallas Cowboys. And when I lived in North Dakota, I like the Minnesota Vikings because, that was the local team. And back when I was in the service, you didn't get national coverage. You got to watch the local flavor, and that was it. So you better like them because that's all you're going to see. But Mark is a diehard New York Giants fan, and we rib them throughout the year because they just had a horrible year, and I don't think it's looking much better for next year. But we won't go into that too deep, will we?
Well, we won't, but check it out. It's good stuff. And then Kenny, I'm hoping you can win enough money at the craps tables and at the poker table that we can shoot my Tesla up into space and have it orbit around the world, because you put a really cool video up with Elon Musk and his shooting his rocket ship up. And I understand he actually blasted a Tesla into space, and it's a Tesla.
His original Roadster, yeah, the red Roadster that they wanted to put some payload in there, so they needed something that was dense and heavy. And he in his interview, he talked about putting something special in there that was near and dear to him. So what would be more appropriate and fitting than his first Roadster Tesla, and then they put a miniature version on the dashboard. Somebody came up with, so there's actually a Tesla. There's two people in that. There's his dummy from his Roadster, and then the miniature version of that. So, but yeah,
you know what's going to happen with that, man. There's going to be some sort of a meteor or something that's going to miss the Earth, and his Tesla is going to hit it and put it right on track to come to Earth. So, I think Elon Musk is going to destroy the Earth with that damn Tesla.
Well, he might be protecting us. That might be going out there and hitting into that meteor and sending it 2 degrees to the right, and then it misses the Earth by 60,000 miles.
Well, it could be, but hey, dude, listen, man, we got through the homework kind of fast there because we want to bring our 2 guests on. Exciting topic this week. We're going to take a deep dive into cybersecurity. So, Kenny, how about introducing our 2 guests?
Love to. I want to introduce 2 venerated cybersecurity industry experts from Intelligent Buildings. Daryl Benson, Vice President of Solutions, and Fred Gordy, Director of Cybersecurity. Welcome to the show, guys.
Thank you, guys.
Well, so Daryl, let's start with you for our listeners who might not know what Intelligent Buildings does. How about giving them the elevator speech, if you would?
Sure. Intelligent Buildings is a consulting company that was founded about 15 years ago, really specializing in the smart building space. And over the course of the time in the past 15 years, we've gained a lot of experience, not only in federal government space, a lot of private sector, large, our specialty customers with and companies with large real estate portfolio's, so who really can take full advantage of a smart building. And over the course of time, we've realized that smart buildings are network buildings, and it's all around about data, and that data needs to be secure. So over the past couple of years, we've been really very interested in identifying areas where our customers might have some vulnerabilities, not only in the software they run, but the systems the network systems they've deployed, and really help those building systems and facility operations people really step up their game and bring their systems up to snuff, for lack of a better term, and find the different vulnerabilities and help them close those gaps.
Well, Daryl, to that point, tell us some of the methodologies that you employ and some of the best practices that help an organization, especially a large portfolio organization, achieve that.
Sure. So what we do in the very beginning, we do several levels of assessment, whether they're remote assessments, but we're really leveraging software and different tools to analyze not only we not only gather data and information from the users, but we're gathering data on the systems from the systems that are running the building. So the building automation systems, we're analyzing some of that data, finding the different vulnerabilities that are part of the setup of how things are running. And we're also analyzing network data. So we're understanding how traffic's moving around the network. And as we all know, in building systems, these can range from a high-end enterprise network to a contractor installed network, and varying levels of access and ability to reach the systems at those times. So we're able to, at the very beginning stages, assess the state and help our customers build programs and policies that alleviate and mitigate those risks.
Awesome.
Well, Fred, last we spoke, and Fred Gordy, for those of you who don't know, came from, among other places, McKinney's, which is one of the predominant, mechanical and building automation contractors in Atlanta. And you were just sort of doing the cybersecurity for McKinney's. And dude, I tell you what, it seems like you've learned a lot. I mean, you were kind of like this innocent cybersecurity gray hat guy who was out there, preaching the gospel. But boy, it sounds like you got your hands dirty and things have changed. We're not in Kansas anymore, right?
No, not at all. Like we talked about, like we talked about, the thing when you and I were talking earlier on, it was more theoretical. I was looking at systems from what I know from a standpoint of, well, by doing it this way, we're leaving holes open and such as that. But now that I've been with Intelligent Buildings now for a couple of years, and actually been out in the field, what I'm seeing is, first off, is all the things that I thought I would see, I am seeing. But then I'm also seeing things that even I couldn't have imagined. And the landscape's changed too, because when we first started talking, there was not a whole lot of threats. But what we've seen in the past 18 months is a significant spike in things like ransomware on control systems. We've seen out and out attacks. So the things that we were talking about a couple of years ago, when people were saying, well, really, is there any interest in a control system? Well, what we said back then was that the bad guys are always looking for the path of least resistance. And guess where it is? It's typically in the control system. The other thing too is, and Daryl tell you this from, he's seen it firsthand experience, is I think evil all the time.
Yeah.
Well, explain that statement, because you and I had a little conversation, and
let me give you
audience to think of you as a choir boy. Explain that statement.
Fred is a choir boy, but when Fred, so I'll give you an example. When Fred, we were at a large real estate holder, and we're walking through their facility, and Fred is literally thinking like a bad guy as best he can with a white hat on. So Fred is thinking about points of physical ingress into the facility. What could happen if you get into this space? If it's a mechanical space, what are the threats that could be manifested if somebody got in that space physically? Not only from a cyber perspective, but physically what happens, and what other security measures can be taken to mitigate those risks? Because there's a limited amount of things that can be protected just by physically, or by locking down the software, locking down the network. If somebody physically gets in the building, there's other pieces of the puzzle. So he's always thinking about if somebody got in and then they access things. And I'll give you one quick example. If you think about, and Fred gave me this example, we saw at a customer site that somebody had installed a wireless router in a kind of an innocuous building space, right? A mezzanine, where a lot of equipment was. Through different methodologies, Fred and his team discovered that you could actually access that wireless router from a parking garage next door. So if you're thinking like a bad guy, you see a wireless router. If you're not thinking like a bad guy, you see a wireless router, you think, oh, that makes it easier for the guys to access the system from up here. If you're thinking like a bad guy, you think, well, can the guy next door access it without you knowing it? So there's all sorts of ways of looking at the different systems and approaches, and really it's about vectors of attack, and all those different vectors Fred's thinking about all the time. So when he says he's thinking like a bad guy, he's considering all those different vectors, not only from a pure cyber perspective, but from a physical and logical perspective.
Well,
That's great stuff. Go ahead.
Well, along that lines is one of the one of the things that OT, operational technology, doesn't do well yet, we're working on it, is what IT's been doing for a long time. And that's actually, managing the devices that are on the network. And like what Daryl was talking about, a particular real world instance was the the people were not monitoring what they had on their network. IT got involved, and we've been working with IT. And when we went to do an audit, there was a printer that was connected, and not long before we got there, well, I would say probably a couple of weeks, but before we got there, somebody, whether it was just a kid playing or a bad guy, accessed that printer and printed to it, there is a bomb in the building.
Wow.
So stop and think about what happened that day. And I can't tell you who's in the building, but let's just say they were high value targets. Well, they had to totally dump a 30-story building. I don't know how many people had to come out of the building. The law enforcement had to go through, search through the building. You had brand damage that happened. You had money, just, real money went out the window because they still had to pay these people. And
you also had response from Homeland Security.
Yes.
And other, not just the first responders. You had the actual cyber responders had to come in and check things out as well.
Let me ask you this: did they catch the person? You didn't catch the person.
No, they didn't catch the person. But here's the part that, going to my point about not watching what you got on your network. So when we went to do the audit, the IT guy told us this. He said, "This is what happened to us a few weeks ago." And we said, "Okay." And he said, "But it's been taken care of. We removed that access point." And I said, "Okay, are you sure?" So he said, "Sure." Well, another thing that I don't do is take your word. I got to see it. So we went and started, one of the guys, I said, "Go out there and look around and see what you can find." With the IT guy standing there with him, within 15 minutes maybe, he said, "You said you had this taken care of." He said, "But I can access it remotely." And he said, "I could print to this printer again." Wow. So the point that I'm getting to is, you got to not only, when you think you've taken corrective action, you got to verify you've taken corrective action.
It's verification and enforcement, right? So there's multiple layers here. There's, especially since in our industry, there's so many layers of service providers, because typically, you're going to have a smaller staff on site and you're reliant on contractors, and the contractors may have things they need to have in place, or at least in the past needed to have in place to access their equipment. The new policies, if you're going to lock something down and provide access a different way, new policies need to be not only enacted but the enforcement of those policies, and double checking to make sure that the person didn't replug in that printer or replug in that wireless access point, or do those different things that make it easier for them, which is an understandable thing, but put unnecessary risk on an organization. And once those policies and procedures are in place, the enforcement is a key thing that we're working on with our customers as well.
Well, I'm disheartened to say that we've been following with Fred in cybersecurity now for 4 years, and it was the top trend in 2014, and it sounds like we haven't moved the needle very much, and that's kind of disheartening, because I think as we all know, the threat level is increasing, and the level of the ransomwares, we've had 4 or 5 examples of that in our own backyard now. So I mean, it's a real thing. But the tools that we need to really protect ourselves, is the industry responding? Like once upon a time, I think we thought that the manufacturers had a very important role, and then we had of course the systems integrators had another important role. That was duties that we used to shun, and now we realize there's a responsibility there, and then there's a liability. I mean, are we moving forward as an industry to a more focused solution, or is it still a poppatory out there, and it's wild west still, and with no real unified thrust to take care of this? Both of you guys can take a crack at that.
Fred, why don't you go first?
Well, the short answer, there is no short answer. Let me tell you the good side of this. What I am seeing, and what Daryl and I have been seeing for the past couple of years, is there's a thought change. Whereas before everybody was, like this, we really don't need to worry about this. The people that are actually driving the change are the end user. That's who we're dealing with. So the manufacturers, I'm not saying the manufacturers are not doing their due diligence, but you guys have heard me say this before. It's not on the manufacturer. It has to be on the integrator as well. And so the end user, the one who's paying the bills to the integrator, is saying, "Hey, wait a minute, we need this taken a look at. And so now the integrator that we've actually been approached by some integrators, hey, can you teach us how to be more cyber secure? So that's the good side of things. The realities or the bad side of things are there is so much, and you guys know this because you guys sell a lot of a product out there. There is a lot of product that's still connected in the old way that it's been connected come from 1998. So there's a lot of work to be done. And one of the things that we do when we go in and do an assessment is we realize that there's not a big blank checkbook to go in and fix everything. So we do an assessment and we do the levels of what you need to do. And we've identified like 19 projects that are very specific. And then we take into account the cyber risk, the operational risk, and IT doesn't have to do that. We do. An operational risk means is if we change this, what is that going to do to the system? Is it going to mess up sequence of operations? Is it going to create
Change
problems?
your contracts?
Change your contracts. That's a good point. And then the other side is the financial impact is, okay, I would love to fix everything, but let's prioritize the low-hanging fruit. And you guys have heard me say this before, is you only have to be faster than the guy that the bear's chasing the two guys. You just have to be faster than the other guy.
Right.
So by getting yourself somewhat protected, the bad guy's going to poke at you a little bit, and he's going, well, that's hard to get in. He's going to move on. But there's going to be this process as people get more and more secure, then the bad guy's going to try harder or they're going to go a different way. But the bottom line is you got to start.
Right. And just to give you my 2 cents on the subject, I think the industry's pivoting. It's pivoting slowly. I think there's some lead users who are pivoting faster. And I think organizations that have more at risk are more apt to change. So we're talking to customers, again, our typical customer has larger real estate portfolios and their risk is more acute, right? So when we talk to the larger real estate portfolios, they have a broader range of equipment and vintage of buildings and systems that have a wide variety. So they're very interested in raising their bar. As Fred just said, if they're at a 1 right now, getting to a 3 means it's better than it was last year. And they just keep jacking the bar up. What we don't see the industry needing is everybody go to 10, right? If everybody if you think that's the bar, nobody's going to do it. So we give people give organizations realistic goals that and then we help them prioritize the different things. Maybe some of their items have to go to a 6, some can stay at a 3. So the point I'm making is that those 19 projects Fred was talking about, as you prioritize them, find out what you can spend, find out your risk tolerance, and find out the ability of the organization to swallow it and your contractors to make the changes. You do these certain things over time to get better. So short answer to me is the industry is pivoting, but to Fred's point, the volume of equipment and buildings that are out there is so vast that it's going to be a slow. It's not one monolithic ship. It's thousands of ships that need to turn.
Individual shifts,
Right,
yeah, I see.
right,
Yeah.
Right. Well, I want to chime in too, because, takeaway I'm taking from this, guys, is the fact that, from the user perspective, it seems like that a lot of times, I mean, it's like if you think about fighters, right? A fighter's only as good as the sparring partners that he has. And if a sparring partner can expose a weakness and they can work on that, then the fighter is going to get better. And Fred, it seems like from what you're saying that a lot of times IT people that are very knowledgeable people, but maybe they don't understand building automation systems or all the components as well as they need to do to understand the vulnerabilities. It sounds like one of the things that you guys do, or a takeaway for a user would be get somebody like Intelligent Buildings or somebody that has your type of skills to come in and not trust what the IT department is saying, to come in and check the premises and make sure, because you've told me a couple of horror stories. You told us one today where they thought that things were taken care of and they were secure. So to me, one of the shifts is, okay, yeah, your integrators are getting smarter, your manufacturers are sensitive to it, but if you're the owner, at the end of the day, you ultimately need to have not just your side of the house, but you need to have you also need to have somebody from the outside come and check your systems.
Well, and so along that lines, to use another example, is like Daryl said, we have a very structured approach to this. And one of the first things is when we do a request for information, we get some background information from the company. And immediately after we get that and kind of digest that, that's when our team goes to work. Before we ever even show up on site, we start looking for things. We start seeing if we can, penetrate from the outside. We start thinking about the portfolio and what I could do to that portfolio.
Right.
And then when we get on, and then we interview the people. And I can tell you from firsthand experience, one particular customer, the vendor was involved, and usually when we encourage the vendors to be involved, is the vendor was involved, and it was an elevator system. And he just really didn't understand why he had to answer all these questions and everything, because he just kept coming back to the fact that our elevators are not exposed. We have to come on site and do stuff. Well, like I said, we don't take your face value or your answers at face value. And that's what our job is our job is to ferret this stuff out. So when we delivered the report, and Daryl was with me, I believe that, Daryl was with me. The first thing that I pointed out is when I went through and showed them everything that I'd found, is I said, and by the way, here's your elevator. Oh yeah, and I also found your fire life safety system, which to me was, I never thought I would find a fire life safety system exposed.
And Fred found these from our offices, right? So he's able to find these systems exposed. And one of the things I just want to chime in here a little bit, you talk about the word trust. It's a good word to use, but I would also use the word, we have to trust but verify, similar to what I think it's a Reaganism, right? Trust but verify. But the most important thing is, most of the people we're talking to, some of them just don't have exposure to all the information they need, or they don't have the experience. So we might be asking people questions about the networks and the systems, and we get answers. Legitimate answer is, I don't know. I don't know tells us volumes about where the knowledge and the endpoints of knowledge are.
Sure.
I'm either way over here on pure facilities, or I'm a pure IT guy, and somebody's moving along these realms of I know and I don't know. And typically we're limited by who we can talk to. Finding the right people to talk to and finding the gaps in the knowledge is an important piece of what we do as well, because we've got to verify what people tell us. And I don't know is a big deal. And I don't know it means there's probably a big gap in knowledge and more than likely capability of the system they're talking about.
It sounds like the process and the methodologies, best practices that you implement after you do your surveys. What is a typical, project length? I mean, just take a random project, and so you do a lot of remote access evaluations and surveys, perhaps, and then you do some on-site physical. What would be a typical project date?
Typically, our initial engagements probably span 4 to 6 months, right? So we're working with you, depending on how many sites we're going to visit, depending on where we're going, but we're typically, if we've got a good grasp on what we're going to be looking at different buildings, different systems, working within IT and facility operations, and eventually we're going to end up helping them write policies and process in that, and kind of get exposure to those things. So the first 6 months really is we've kind of lifted the covers off everything. We've exposed what's out there, and we've given the foundational piece of what can be done to start mitigating that. It's not mitigated. Normally, depending on the scope of an operation, mitigation can take any number of, depending on what the mitigation strategy would be and what the exposure rate is. But the initial engagement that we do, the first 4 months is really about getting, exposing things and setting a foundation.
And that becomes part of the organizational fabric. From that point forward, they've got something that they can work, and it's another pillar within their existence. They write in all the employee handbooks, and that really sounds awesome. I can't applaud you enough, because as from our side of it, what we always hear the bad news, and when we try to tell people to get in touch with intelligent buildings, for instance, or you got to do something. The worst thing you do is ignore it because it's not going to go away. It's a question of, not a question of if, but when. And then one of the favorite things that Fred Gordy taught me back many years ago that I took with me every time I go and do a presentation is you got to have a plan. You got to have some sort of an action plan that if something happens, what are the steps you take? Who do you notify? Because I was in the military and we used to write these quick reaction checklists or security response options. And that meant, boom, the bad guys hit us. Now what are we going to do? Because it's so important to do the containment and to, lessen the wound rather than ignore it or close your eyes to it, because the chances are that they've been in your system for over, how many days is it, Fred? 200 days, the average?
Yeah, it's roughly 200 days.
So, like I say, well done, guys.
Well, along the lines of the response, that's called an incident response plan. I mean, I don't want to say you can't survive, but, we all know some firsthand examples of that. Ken, you're even closer to some of it than some particular people than we are. The reality is it's how you react within the first 5 hours, 12 hours, whatever, is going to determine what happens to your brand, because that's something that it takes you years to build and seconds to lose.
Well said.
Well said, for sure. So, guys, I kind of want to go through 3 groups here and sort of, if you could give them a couple of pieces of advice, if you guys could take a magic wand and have them do it. And we'll start with the owners. And obviously, the first thing you want to have an owner, and then we'll go from the owners to the manufacturers to the systems integrators. But if you could give the owners a couple of pieces of advice right off the bat, one of them would obviously be, call Intelligent Buildings, or somebody like you would be my first advice.
Right.
To what are some things that they should be, if you could give them some advice, because we have a lot of end users that are listening, 1 or 2 pieces of advice.
I would say for an end users, if you're facility operations, first thing you should do is take control of all of the software running in your system, meaning get a hold of the passwords, manage who's accounting, who's got access, and really just lock down just base access to software. Typically, when we come into a site, there's dozens, maybe 4 people working in the building that should have access, but there's 2 and 3 dozen users that are all super users, or passwords never expire, all this stuff. And typically that's because it's just easier if nobody's managing it, the easiest thing to do is just open it up. So my first piece of advice is just get a hold of the access to the software you're running. Fred, is that pretty good?
That is spot on. And the thing is yeah, I think you probably heard me say this before. Is the term I like to use: you bought the system, you don't own it yet. And the only way to own a system is just like if you bought a server. The server's not administered by Dell. But what we've done, and I point the finger at myself because I was an integrator for 17 years, is what we did is we created an environment of convenience. And the convenience is we understand the system and how to manage it as an integrator better than the facility operator, and not the facility operator is not smart. It's just they have a pretty loaded plate as it is. They got to keep the building running. They got to keep people happy. That's all well and fine, but now what you are is you're 100% dependent on the integrator. And to give you a real world example, one of our customers got hit with ransomware, and we were looking at me going and on site and everything. Well, I just asked a few questions before I ever showed up. I said, do they have a backup? Because with ransomware, you only got really 2 choices. One is you pay the Bitcoin, get it decrypted. Well, if you do that, you don't know what they left behind, or you rebuild the system. Well, we know as integrators to rebuild a system, if you're doing a consistent backup, you can restore an image pretty quick. But when they said, well, we don't have a backup, we want you to figure it out. And I said, well, there's nothing for me to figure out. Your system is gone, unless you want to pay the Bitcoin, which I don't recommend. So that the backups I've seen it more times than not that the integrator owns the backups. The building owner doesn't have backups. They don't, or in some cases they're backing up right to the same machine. Well, which if you get ransomware, everything's locked up. include your backup.
Well said. Well, Fred, sort of along those lines for the systems integrators out there, because we got a lot of, systems integrators and more coming in that most of them are at least aware of cybersecurity and the threat there. But what advice would you give a building automation controls contractor or systems integrator?
The first thing would be is to develop a standardization of hardening the devices and the systems that you're putting in. Now that sounds maybe onerous to some people, but there's, like I was talking about earlier, if you just get ahead of the other guy, meaning if I get to be known as an integrator, and I'm going to pull up some names from the past, Billy Rios and Terry McCorkle, they found a Google site in Australia. And when they figured out what the username and password for that site was, they knew who the integrator was, and they just started sampling around. And guess what? They found a hospital they could get into. They found all these other places they could get into. Why? Because the integrator had a practice of only putting one username and password in all of their systems.
Wow.
Well, that's a huge vulnerability. So as an integrator, you need to adopt some kind of what I call the implementation stage credentials, and then the handover. And just like when you cut over a building and you hand the keys to the building to the control system and all the other parts of the building, the people that bought the building now take that ownership. And one of the things with the integrator that and I've run into guys that are not real happy when they see me walk in the door. But what I have to explain, and I'm talking about integrators, vendors, is what I explain to them is, do you want to continue to accept the risk, or do you want to hand the risk back to the customer? Because as long as you are the guy that's maintaining this and you're putting in the users and you're handling all this, when a breach happens, you're the first one in the firing squad. So when you explain it to them that way and they start thinking about, I don't necessarily want to be in that line, especially when my customer is a hospital or whatever the case may be, then yeah, I'm okay with that. I'll turn that over to them. But going back to my thing about getting ahead of the other guy is, if you're going in there and you're not doing things default, meaning if you're doing a backnet, BBMD, or any kind of backnet device, take it off for 47808, because every bad guy knows that port 4708 is a standard default backnet port. And you guys have seen videos that I've done where I don't even use any manufacturer software. I just take a piece of free software off the web, and if I can get to your BBMD, I own your network. But if I have to hunt for 478, have to hunt for your port, then I may move on.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense.
I'll make one more kind of add on to what Fred was saying about integrators. I think most integrators have some best practices that have served them well as the industry's modified and gone into DDC, and their guys have developed best practice. And to Fred's point, when you've got a group of guys that are tasked with getting jobs done, they come up with their own internal team. Hey, this just works better. Hey, Charlie did this one. Make an admin password as the password, so I can get in too. What most integrators really need to do is modernize their best practices, modernize what they do, and bring themselves into the actual cyber secure time frame, right? So we have to be much more aware and take that risk off of, as an integrator, we shouldn't be carrying that risk of providing the security. We should be able to push that back to the owner and have them provide that security.
I think that's the greatest takeaway of our session here today, is that Eric and I were at several places now where managed services have come to the surface as what's going to be the future, is to get into managed services, because 95% of the business out there is going to be in services and 5% is in the hardware. But it sounds to me like we're going to see that exactly what you just said, Daryl and Fred, that we're going to have the people that put the stuff in the systems integrators look at that opportunity to turn over that system to the end user's IT department and incorporate that into the managed services being offered to that facility or that organization. So I think that's a good takeaway there. So we could recommend our systems integrators, drive to that point.
Right. Now, I think the other thing that's sort of emerging here, if it's convenient, it's probably not secure.
Yes.
I mean, I think that seems to be one of the takeaways we got here. Well, great guys. Now let's sort of cycle on to the manufacturers. Are there things that the manufacturers are not doing today that they could be to make their systems more cyber secure?
I think a lot of the manufacturers are as rapidly as possible modernizing and keeping their equipment as best as they can up to date. My personal view kind of leans back to the integrator question. Push the channels to have better best practices that really take advantage of whatever tools they're building in to their capabilities that they're building into their software. And we all know this. Fred's been talking about this for a year. Usually, the weakest link in all the chains are the people, right?
Mm-hmm.
I can fish you. You can, we can find out things about you, find out your birthday, and all of a sudden that's your password. So I would say that push their channels to be more cyber compliant. And again, that's a little bit about the channels doing it themselves, but as manufacturers pushing the requirements down into their channel, I think would be a good thing.
Well, we've seen that. We've seen some of the manufacturers now. You have to have a password phrase now. You have to change the default password. I mean, so yeah, we're seeing. Yeah, I think that some of the messaging you all have done has been very vital in the awareness, getting to all points to systems integrators and manufacturers. But it's still a very slow process. Wouldn't you agree? I mean, that's going to give you. It's going to keep you guys busy.
Yeah, well, exactly. It's a vast industry, and it's a vast installed base with every manufacturer across that has put systems in, and we deal mostly with North America. So think about the number. As I said earlier, it's thousands of ships that need to turn, and they're all going at different rates and different directions. They have different abilities to make it happen, and especially when you talk about smaller scale organizations. They might think the risk is actually lower because of volume. They might have fewer buildings and fewer systems, but it just takes that one thing. So best practices need to be able to be spread out.
And I think the thing too that this is not a digital event, meaning, well, we did something with intelligent buildings and now we're secure. It's an analog thing because the bad guys are not, they're not just stopping with their, their tricks, right? I mean, they're constantly updating. So it's something you're going to be doing the rest of your life.
Well, the thing that I say over and over is it's just like buying a car. As soon as you drive off the parking lot, the car devalues, right?
Yeah.
So as soon as we go in and we do an assessment and we take a look at everything and we come up with a remediation report or remediation plan and such, if we walk out the door and you don't touch it, even if you make some of the changes, if you're not staying on top of it, down the road, it's gonna degrade.
I think one of the core tenets of what Intelligent Buildings does, we talk about three key areas. There's buildings and all the building systems and the infrastructure that's put in the buildings. There's the technology component of really the IT piece and the networks and that level of infrastructure. But a piece that is often forgotten is the people part, right? If you don't change your practice, if you don't change how you operate or make, like Fred just said, if you got all this information and you didn't make a new, better decision, then shame on you, right? So we've got to really enable all of our customers, everybody in the industry. Our goal is to enable everybody to make that decision, make it better than it was last week. And as Fred said earlier, just run faster than the other guy and keep ahead of them and just keep that pace of getting better. You don't have to design the ultimate secure network that a gigantic multinational would do if you're a company that has 50, 60 buildings, 30, 40 million square, however many million square feet you have. You just need to get better than you were before. And I think that's a key message we give to our customers as well.
Well, speaking of your customers, how do people engage you guys? What's the best way?
The best way, you can email either Fred or I, and we can put you in contact with our sales. And I'm sure you're going to have our email addresses in a link. And just reach out to us. And we can absolutely, we'd love to talk to not only end customers, well, as Fred said earlier, we're engaging the integrator channel and providing some best practices and partnership opportunities with the channel as well. So if you're a company that owns real estate, or if you're a person in this smart building technology channel, we'd be more than happy to talk to you.
Well, there you go. Well, our guests have been Daryl Benson from Intelligent Building and Fred Gordy, the nicest bad guy you'll ever meet, the best good guy, the goodest, baddest guy you'll ever meet. So, guys, man, can't tell you how much I appreciate you guys. Kenny, I appreciate you guys coming on the show. So thanks a lot, fellas.
Well, we
Thank you
appreciate
very much.
you having us. Yes, thank you.
Dude, was that awesome or what?
Yeah, it is. It's always beneficial to talk to the experts that are really leading the way. But they're so generous with the guidance and information. I took notes because this is the real stuff. This is the really important, valuable information that you take right back and put it into play. And I see good things for Intelligent Buildings, Fred Gordy and Daryl. They're going to be doing very well in the future because our industry needs it. So it's such a vital service and solution.
So for our Controltrends community out there, you're probably looking at Kenny if you're watching the video cast, and he looks like he's lost weight. He looks so slim. And have you been working out, or is it just that stripes have a thinning effect?
The stripes have a thinning effect. Well, it's interesting because this place is coming to life. I couldn't find a quiet place at first. Every time I thought I found a place, somebody was waking up and sitting right next to me. So we had late night and early morning. But Vegas hasn't changed a bit. The place is 24/7, and it was really cold. But now the sun's out, and it's just an instant change of temperature. And I'm in the inside of a cabana, a very fancy fan. It's got televisions. It's got all kinds of stuff. You can close the curtains and enjoy privacy.
Yeah,
but,
you got the wide angle cameras. Our audience can't see this, but I can see it. And he's got the showgirls in there with him, so bringing cocktails and stuff like that. So,
Sleeping Beauty's upstairs, and if she hears me, she hears me talking to the showgirls, I'll be in trouble.
Yeah, Kenny's having a big time out there in Vegas. But dude, last time we were out there, and I wanted to give a shout out to remember we went and saw the Beatles Love with one of your integrators. And if you ever go to Vegas, Cirque du Soleil, the Beatles Love, I think it's the only place on the planet you can see it. I've seen it like 4 times. And dude, who was it we were with? That was
Jim Jancy from Running
Jim Jancy. That's right. Yeah.
And then we saw it again with my daughters, Sabrina, and her husband Brandon. Remember?
Yeah. You can never see that show too many times. So,
but that was last year's Controltrends.
Yeah, it was. All right. Well, man, I tell you what, Kenny, we're going to wrap up. We're going to let you get back to your cabana stuff and get in trouble. I guess what stays in Vegas, what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas unless your wife is with you. And then I think you just have to make sure that whatever happens in Vegas could come home too, right? So. Well, I'll tell you what, Kenny, with that, we are going to thank Daryl Benson and Fred Gordy from Intelligent Buildings for being our guests this week. We're going to thank our Controltrends community for tuning in. We appreciate you because without you, Kenny and I just be talking to ourselves, and we do too much of that already. So remember, be bold, stay in control, stay relevant, and this week, stay secure.
Indeed, Eric.